All right, what's up, you all? We live on YouTube now, Instagram, Twitter, Rumble. I got a good friend of mine here, Teach Him Chuck. I liken him to an expert on history, political history, anything dealing with communism, Marxism, global, anything to get you to why things are the way they are today. Then I would reference Chuck. And we are here today because of somebody, Marquise the Saint. He did a video, and I ain't gonna lie to you all, the video rubbed me the wrong way. And I sent it to Chuck, like, please, can we discuss this? But without further ado, here, Teach Him Chuck.
What's
You on?
up, man? Hey, listen, bro. It's been a minute, man. You and I have never done a joint. We haven't done a joint live in a long time, so looking forward to this little conversation. Uh, like I said, well, like you mentioned, you sent me the link of this dude, and oh boy, I had never heard of him. From what I understand, he's one of these manosphere content creators. Like he's like a major fixture over there, and so I'm not really in that. I'm not present right in that section, that segment of the internet, because I'm not one of these one of these jaded, insecure, excuse making man children online blaming women for all of their problems. I'm not one of those men, so I don't really find joy uh, or entertainment for that matter. Certainly isn't enlightening over there. So I never heard of this guy, but I guess now, Blanche, based on the link you sent me, I guess he also does political and historical commentary as well. So I said, oh, okay. So now, now you done got our attention now. So now you're gonna have to deal with some. Now you got to deal with grown men, not man children, not these little young 19, 20-year-old OnlyFans models that you can go on these podcasts and make a fool out of. You're dealing with grown men now. So things gonna be a little different.
and and Chuck, and he was getting on Kevin Samuels as being a fake. And I want to say this in Kevin Samuels' defense. Kevin Samuels came online as himself. He came when he was, giving content for men and all. He never came as not Kevin Samuels. He didn't have an image, and we saw Kevin Samuels evolve into what we know as Kevin Samuels. To me, these guys are trying to emulate
Him. Yeah.
the finished product of Kevin Samuels. They don't really have like a genesis, and so they're like coming online already polished, already. I got millions in the bank. I'm a financial guru. Let me just share some. To me, it's all cap because there's plenty of guys exposing this guy Marquise for his business scams, and he's out of control. But I didn't mind it, Chuck, until I saw that video and I said, no, we ain't doing that. You should have stayed over there. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. You should have stayed over there, giving bad advice to men. So that you should have stayed over there, man.
And
I,
he does like men's retreats where men pay to come spend the week. Listen, I'm not joking. Men will pay money to come fly to where he is, and they do a guy's retreat. I don't know, man. I don't know.
sounds kind of suspect to me,
Yeah,
but that's okay. Okay. All right. All right. And you said that this dude tried to butter him. When Kevin Samuels was alive, he tried to be his friend, and then you told me privately that he bought a box of chocolates for
yeah.
Andrew
That was
Tate.
well. He tried to pull up on Kevin Samuels. That didn't work. But he pulled up on Andrew Tate with chocolates and gifts and his business. He had got these new business cards. He was excited about his new business cards, and so I guess he figured if he showed the security guard these cards that he was going to get in. And he kept mentioning these chocolates. Then he was riding in the car talking about. Matter of fact, can I just play the video,
Oh
Chuck?
yeah. Let's go and get into it.
So you can see what I'm talking about. So I can. But to my knowledge, Chuck, you might correct me if I'm wrong. I never heard Kevin Samuels say he was a business guru.
No, I never heard him say that either.
Hold on, a second, Chuck.
Never heard him say that either. I mean, he bragged, always talked about him, being an image consultant. He did say that he he said he made a lot of his contacts in the food and beverage industry, because I think he used to work for
Oh,
the
yeah.
corporation that owns Papa Do's, or one of those fine dining restaurants down there, and in the Houston area, I believe, because I
Yeah.
think he lived in multiple places. But yeah, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, I mean, Kevin Samuels is someone that you would consider a businessman, but I mean, I don't know. He was doing his consulting. That's what he was. He was a professional image consultant, and then he did some other type of consulting. I don't know. I don't know.
But I mean, but again, Kevin Samuels was, let's say, image consultant, let's say corporate America, advertising, all those things. But still, women was asking him for advice. So he didn't like jump into the lane of becoming this relationship expert. He was requested based on his content. And to me, that's what made it organic. That's what made it real and authentic. And these guys now are just no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna just let me go to this video real quick, just as you can see him go up to this. Hold on a second. Let me share this screen. Pulling up on Andrew Tate, then I'll go to the Kevin Samuels one, then we can jump into it. I just want you to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, he's up. Okay, let's see.
And I should probably take out my AirPods so I can actually hear what's being said. You got some pretty curious accommodations right there. I wonder, was this a repurposed building? So here we go. Chocolates on deck. We're in the spot. These guys are secure. Like, that's one that I can tell you. Like, these cats are secure. I don't know which one of these to push. This one looks newer, but I don't know where the button is. So I wish we had that Nick, that Matthew, Shay video so we could see which to press. So somebody could check and tell me which one he pressed. Okay, press that. Somebody worked.
Coming. People are coming.
Oh, no. Somebody scrambled the signal. That's what.
So, Chuck, he left him the chocolates and his business card. Yeah, so that's.
I mean, the fact that Andrew Tate is someone. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand the point of bringing a man chocolates, or I don't know if that was for the receptionist of, I don't know, one of Andrew Tate's many women that he allegedly sexually exploits. I say allegedly in a very facetious manner, because I believe that he has, and he probably still does, at least by his own admission, and his brothers. But the fact that Andrew Tate is someone that you want to meet for the purpose of, I don't know, you want to get in his good graces, you feel as though there may be some sort of financial advantage from being associated with him in some way. I mean, Andrew Tate is he's not a moral man, he's not an ethical man. And I mean, it tells me everything that I need to know about you. That's weird. What was that? Did Andrew Tate know he was coming, or he just flew to Romania on a whim?
Yes. He did not know he was coming.
Wow.
You saw he cut the footage out when he got rejected. You saw the door open and the guy, and it cut that he in the car already. So he cut the rejection part out, you know.
And this guy has an audience. He has followers, people that respect him. Let me see. I'm about to see how many subscribers he got on YouTube, if I can even find him.
He might have 60-some thousand, maybe.
Oh, 60-something. I know that's enough. That's enough, you know, because he shouldn't have any. Marquette, what's his name?
I think it's Marquise. Marquette. It might be Marquette.
Okay, yeah, I see it didn't populate it. Aye.
So I just want to just let you listen to him real quick, and then we can jump right into it. I just want you to hear him talking about Kevin Samuels,
All right,
which doesn't make any sense because, I don't know, it was just a dumb take he took.
Mm-hmm.
We should be able to read about your companies in the media. So check it out. Put in, quote, Kevin Samuels, end quote, and then use Google to search for news. There literally are only 2 news articles on this man from media. He is a fraud. No businessman can do business and only have 2 news articles on them. That's ridiculous. This year has been mostly ruined by COVID-19, and I got 2 business articles on me. Why? Because I'm actually a businessman. This man is out there impersonating other people's identity. He is an image consultant, which makes perfect sense because he's all image, smoke and mirrors, all appearance, no substance. Now, why is that important? Because in the age of the internet, people can pretend to be all kinds of things while being nothing. And
Chuck, is it possible to have a business article written about you?
I believe it is.
How's that the criteria for a business?
Sounds plausible to me, man. I don't know. You gotta do better than that. I need more. I goes without saying, I didn't know Kevin Samuels personally. I have no special stake in trying to defend him or taking offense if someone says something disparaging about him. But I just don't really find. Where's the merit in your argument? You know, the fact that there are no news articles written about him, or you search his name, and I don't know. Like, what are you expecting to find? What are you looking for? I don't know.
He's saying that he got 2 articles about him in 1 year, and Kevin has. So
listen, man, I don't. I don't know, man. I'm not concerned with no back and forth, internet drama between 2 content creators. I'm assuming he made that when Kevin Samuels was still alive. But if he did it after Kevin Samuels died, that's especially distasteful. It's unnecessary.
Yeah, after he died, he did it. Yeah.
See, yeah. Yeah, it sounds like something a person who looks up to Andrew Tate. It sounds like something they would do. Person who looks up to Andrew Tate. Why would you make such a video after the death of a man? I don't know. Goodness gracious. Give it a moment, man. Give it some time. I guess I don't know.
Chuck, the argument was just dumb.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
Okay, you also this is the Saint, Marquette the Saint. He's from, I want to say, Los Angeles. Now, he claims that he either used to pimp or he may still pimp, or he didn't get caught pimping. I don't know. I think he said he went to Johns Hopkins University. He did something in tech, but then he said he used to be a school teacher. So I don't know what to believe, but he used to be an elementary school. He used to be an elementary school teacher / pimp. And now he's a financial guru. I don't know. So but all that was cool with me until I saw this video. And I didn't mind none of that stuff, Chuck. This right here, I'm like, nah. Now you trying to, nah. So when I saw it, I immediately hit Chuck up and can you go live with this? And here we are. So, and Chuck, if you want to stop at any moment, just say stop. And
okay.
Yeah, because I know you probably got your notes ready. So if you want to interject, just let me know and I'll just stop it immediately.
Yeah. I got my notepad, my pen. Like I told you before, I couldn't watch it. I couldn't get through it. The moment he started speaking, I was done. Like I said, he didn't get to the end of his sentence. He said about 5 words. I stopped it. I said, I'm gonna just go in blind and just react in the moment.
Oh, this should be good.
And then I changed my mind. I said, I'm gonna watch it. So that way I'm prepared. just in case. And I got maybe 6 minutes in, maybe, and then I just couldn't take no more. I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it. So
before we get started, Jay, I got a question.
Yeah.
If a person is born on a continent or body of land, are they entitled to a portion of the land?
If they're born there,
yeah,
it's because they're no.
Because to me, the premise is like if somebody's born that land is yours. I'm like, when does that ever take it? That's never happened in human history.
No.
I'm born somewhere and it's my land.
No.
Okay, I was just checking, thinking if I was tripping. I'm like, this is you're not entitled to land. That's crazy.
No.
Okay, let's get started. Hold on.
Started bringing up something called identify as white, started bringing up something called the Great Replacement. Put simply, the Great Replacement theory says that too much immigration of non-white folks to countries that are mostly made up of white folks is bad.
Now, this is an important concept, and this is why the Book of Dark Truths is such a critical lesson to help you navigate. You see, the Great Replacement theory is quite comical because it relies wholly on lies and also on a psychotically racist thinking, which is errant thinking and evil thinking. I'll tell you why. Number one, they're saying that they can't have non-whites come into white countries. It's not right. It's not fair. But that would make sense if we were in Europe, which is a subcontinent or a part of a continent. You see, the Europeans are.
Now, when he says they, I mean, what is he talking about when he says they? I mean, because the United States, I mean, during the imperial / colonial, and those words are oftentimes used interchangeably, although they mean two different things. I guess for the sake of argument, we'll use them interchangeably. Or no, I'll just give a brief explanation. And so sometimes when you have these kind of massive empires that's, span across the globe, you have the core of any given empire, and then you have the colonies at the periphery. Sometimes the colonies are under direct rule and under direct control by the empire proper, right? The core of the empire directly controls the political goings on at the periphery. When you have imperialism or some type of imperial oversight magistrate, you essentially have what amounts to like a kind of directorate, right? This kind of overarching or some entity to which you can defer when decisions have to be made, or when you need guidance and instruction on how to properly go about doing things. Even prior to, before, as case in point, or point of fact, when it came to the United States prior to the Revolutionary War, there were a lot of colonies that were operating independently, because a lot of the governors that had been appointed to the colonies by Great Britain or by the British Empire had been removed, and the colonies, for a time leading up to the Revolutionary War, had essentially begun governing themselves. And so, there were all sorts of course, west of the Mississippi, was still part of Mexico, or part of the former Aztec Empire. And so out of all of that, it's fair to say that England sort of won the colonial sweepstakes with respect to the landmass that we refer to as the United States today. And so the United States, considering the fact that, you have disparate peoples who came to the United States to settle the land. They didn't steal it or take it over from anyone necessarily, because, of course, the United States didn't exist yet, right? But given the fact that the United States is a country that was sort of like it was like a beacon for different peoples from different parts of the world, our heritage and our tradition is not defined by blood and soil or by the race. What defines our collective heritage here in the United States is the Enlightenment principle of universality that is embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And so the United States, I mean, we have a written constitution in the United States, but in our father country, the British Empire or Great Britain, they have something that is referred to as common law. Common law isn't written. It's based upon tradition and expectation over a longer period of time. In the United States, we have an actual written constitution. But considering the fact that the United States, as a former colony of the British Empire, we are kind of seen as an extension or a sister company, the progeny of the kind of wider Anglo-Saxon, the Anglo-American liberal world empire. We're seen as a, right, and since the end of World War II, we became like the hegemon of that entire project. And so when he's talking about replacing countries that are predominantly white, that's not what we're talking about at all, because our heritage and our tradition is not defined by race. It's not defined by race. It's defined by principles. It's defined by ideas that are outlined, of course, in our Declaration and in the Bill of Rights and so on and so forth. And so when you have people that are migrating to the country in mass, of course, you undermine that whole entire project. And it's funny too, Blanche, the way they gaslight, because they brag about how they're doing this, because this is supposed to improve the lives of native born Americans and those not native to the United States, right? It's supposed to improve all of our lives, right? It's essentially render border superficial. They tell you they're doing it, they brag about how they're doing it, and when you get upset about what they're doing, they will say that what you're saying isn't actually happening when they openly brag about it. They brag about how they want to replace the white race in the United States, replace the white race in Europe, to kind of to make some sort of recompense for these century-old gripes. And then this dude here is probably going to get into a lot of that, right? Essentially, what it amounts to is payback in modern time. This is the just thing to do, because what the Europeans have done over the past 6-7 centuries has led to, all of this turmoil, so they claim.
One question, Chuck. So I think that many people are under the illusion that there was this utopian world, everybody got along, and then white people came along and they just started slaughtering and pillaging and plundering. So my question for you is, was the world a utopia before the quote unquote white man started spreading his violence and disease? I'm just
yeah, that's the funny thing about it, is because a lot of these ideas that we have of such things as, common grace, right, the inherent dignity of all human beings, these are uniquely Western ideas that have been propped up, or that came to a head from the point of the Renaissance all the way to the Enlightenment. And we have the Protestant Reformation, which was a major aspect of the Enlightenment movement, which brought forth this idea of the sanctity of the individual in the first place, which kind of lended itself to, at the same time, the sort of humanist tradition that came out of the philosophies of such men as, say, like John Locke and, David Hume, Adam Smith, Baron de Montesquieu, John Stuart Mill, right? These classical liberals, right? And so, in fact, to your point, Blanche, it's the complete opposite, because European imperialism and colonialism is what kind of gave rise to the ideas that we now take for granted, right? And we sit here in the present and pass judgment on the past, when it was the men of the past who did these dastardly things that paved the way for us to have this sort of moral clarity that we have today. Because no kind of reform en masse has ever happened without some sort of imperial imposition. And so the fact that, you had the Spanish Empire and the British Empire and the Portuguese, and a lot of times they were vying for supremacy over one another, so as not to become subordinate to a neighboring or to a rival king or queen or crown or empire. Another, like a perfect example, when we did have the Protestant Reformation, you had at the time the Spanish crown or the Spanish Empire was extremely mighty, was extremely strong. And I can't remember the name of the ruler at the time. I think it was a woman. She may have been a queen or a princess, but I can't remember her name. But she put forth a vow to essentially recapture the whole of Europe for the sake of the Catholic Church, to kind of reunite the body of Christ, because of course the Protestant faith was seen as this kind of rebellious kind of offshoot that had along with it this spirit of political rebellion. And so at the same time, you had Queen Elizabeth in England was like, well, no, we're going to establish the Church of England, which essentially created almost like a Catholic version, if you will, of Protestantism, which then gave rise to the nonconformist movement, which is why we have so many Protestant factions today. And so England was saying, well, we need to expand because we are anticipating future conflict with Spain, because they have essentially been given a kind of papal bull to bring under its sway all countries that have essentially pledged their allegiance to Protestantism as opposed to Roman Catholicism. And so you had all this stuff going on at the same time. And so to your point, Blunt, no, man, absolutely. The world was not some wonderful land of roses and strawberries. You wouldn't believe some of the things that these people seen when they went to Africa and Asia, and particularly, here in the Americas with the Aztec Empire under Montezuma, and the amount of child sacrifice that happened at their capital of Tenochtitlan, and the amount of people that were sacrificed. You're talking female infanticide. You're talking human sacrifice to the gods. You're talking female genital mutilation. You're talking about child brides, sex trafficking, child sex. I mean, just on and on and on. When a lot of these Europeans went to these places, they were just shocked and appalled at the things that they had seen. So it's weird, Blanche, that they think that the world is just, I don't get it, bro. You tell me why they think this.
It shouldn't be weird, because they love movies like Apocalypto that showed you what they was. I mean, like, they was playing games with human beings, like for sport, killing people. Even movies like 300. Everybody loves 300, but that was a bunch of quote unquote black people trying to conquer the world. Y'all love that. So
yeah.
I just think it's just how they pick and choose. They love it to see it on film, but then in real life they mad at the white man.
Right. Well, see, Blanche. Well, here's what they're talking about, and this was commonplace during that time all throughout the world. When you're talking about imperialism and colonialism, you're essentially talking about empire building, and what an empire is you have this governing structure under which you have a multitude of different peoples from different racial groups and ethnic groups and different religious affiliations and so on and so forth. And within the confines or within the context of that empire, you have one group that has dominance over the others. And with that dominance, right, or with that, the advantage of being the dominant group, you can then determine essentially the overall policy, or at least in terms of how the government functions throughout the whole of the empire. And there were many different empires. We saw some of the earliest examples of empire building in the Far East in China. You had the Asante Empire in Western Africa. You had the Comanche Empire in what is today modern day Texas. You had the Aztec Empire. You had the Incan Empire. You had the Zulu Empire in Southern Africa. You had the Ottoman Empire, which was one of the longest reigning caliphates, or is the longest reigning caliphate from about, I'm trying to remember how many centuries the Ottoman Empire lasted. I don't think it lasted as long as Eastern Rome, but it lasted a very, very long time. And so it doesn't really seem to be a problem when anyone else does this. This is why when you listen to people like him, you're not looking at an actual historical, a kind of teaching, a kind of dispassionate observation of what happened in our past. No, you're looking at a propagandist. You're looking at somebody who is, trying to prop up and promote some sort of emotional kind of, melodrama for the purpose of, you know, political agitation. But this man is a fraud.
So it says the Ottoman Empire lasted 600 years.
Okay.
Let's continue on.
Such supremacists and liars that they've taught you that Europe is a continent when in fact it's not. So they have lied to you, teaching you that there's 7 continents when there in fact are only 6. The Europeans do not have their own continent, such as, say, the Africans, but their racism has caused them to tell you a blatant lie such that they could claim their own continent. But I say that to suggest this: if we were in Europe and we were saying, oh, you know, we don't want to be replaced, we, the white Europeans, that would make sense, for Europe is the home of you whites. That's the factory of the whites. That's where you come from. And to be replaced in your homeland, I mean, that is a bit strange. I could agree with that. You know, Europe for the Europeans, Africa for the Africans, China for the Chinese, all sounds reasonable. However, uniquely among the peoples of the earth, one particular group of people is particularly vicious, and they don't say Europeans, Europe for the Europeans. They pretty much say everything for the Europeans. Yes, they invade China and Asia. They took over the entire continent of Australia through utter murder and violence, evil, you might say. They did the same thing to the whole continent of North America, and they did quite a number on the continent of South America as well. They didn't skip Central America. Their violence spread there. Then they went to the massive continent of Africa, tried to wipe.
I'm sorry, Blaine. Let me know if I'm interrupting too much.
No. You can stop.
God. Again, this man is lying. You know, another thing that gets me with people like him, they act as though, you know, again, I'll repeat, they were different. You had the Dutch, you had the English, you had the Germans, and again, they didn't always get along. There were intense rivalry between England and France for the longest time. Again, and that divide was split along religious. You know, that divide was split along religious lines. I mean, you had religious conflicts within England proper, which led to the glorious revolution of 1688, I think the year was, which is what essentially established the British Parliament, which kind of took absolute rule away from the monarchy. All Europeans, again, didn't always get along, and the funniest thing about this to me is the fact that they seem to assume that these empires or these various European nation states had infinite resources at their disposal. How are they able to do all of this?
I know.
How are these small? I mean, you're going to a native land, right, Blanche? You're outnumbered, right? You're coming in. How are you able to?
You got to get there first.
You got to get there. And once you get there, how are you inflicting all of this pain? How are you taking these places over? You're taking, you're sitting, if you want to call it a takeover, which in many instances, it wasn't even that. A lot of the natives in these areas welcomed the Europeans with open arms, because in many instances, they were looking for some sort of influence of stability in the land, because there was a massive degree of insecurity amongst the natives. Because once again, as we keep saying over and over again, for centuries and centuries, a lot of the natives in these lands had been warring and fighting again with one another, and so they accepted a lot of what the Europeans had to offer, and they were helped along in this way. And again, they didn't do it. It wasn't always force and violence and look here, you're going to do it or else we're going to do so and so. So it didn't happen that way. It didn't happen that way. A lot of the natives were welcoming to the Europeans that came in. There's examples of this throughout. I mean, even again, when the Dutch came in, because of course that was the first part of Africa that was settled by Europeans, but they called it the Cape of Good Hope. And when they came in, they conquered the massive Zulu Empire there in that region of the continent of Africa. But they had subjugated other smaller, weaker tribes and brought them under the rubric the Zulu kings. Everybody knows the story of Shaka Zulu, who had engaged in extermination campaigns on multiple occasions, but he subdued two separate groups of Africans living in that particular area of the continent called the Shona and the Antebellum. The Antebellum and the Shona. And so when the Europeans came in, again, they brought order. And many of the natives could then go to the Europeans to air out their grievances because they had to come in and essentially police the area, because these areas in many times were just simply lawless.
So I have a question, Chuck. So let's just say we take Shaka Zulu, for instance, and he had two, I guess, tribes subjugated. They would almost be running to the Dutch or any European just to say this, they got us under their boot, help us,
Yeah, I need help. I need help. That's right. And so that's how they were able to and not just, I mean, again, the short of it is that the natives, for various reasons, saw benefit in cooperation and in cooperating with them, right? They saw many groups and many individuals benefited from it. And there is no one reason, no rationale or explanation as to why folks in Europe sought other lands. I mean, some people just had a zest or a zeal for exploration. It kind of has it has a kind of derogatory context now, but this is what historians refer to as Orientalism. You had some Europeans who were just fascinated by foreign cultures, and they weren't fascinated by foreign cultures in a kind of patronizing way. A lot of Europeans, considering the fact that they actually believe the East and parts of like Central Asia, India, and so forth to be, far more ancient than their countries and civilizations, where they actually revered the peoples of Central Asia. In many instances, you had a man by the name of Warren Hastings. He was a British imperialist who had a very fond relationship with the peoples of India, and he, in many respects, helped to rehabilitate the Bhagavad Gita and a lot of their classic writings, translated a lot of their classic Indian writings into English, helped to restore and rehabilitate a lot of the cultural artifacts and writings and things of that nature that had been destroyed by the Mughals, which were the Muslims that controlled India for a time before the Christians that came in, right? You had certain individuals who fled parts of Europe because they were seeking economic opportunities. They were fleeing war and famine and starvation themselves. They were fleeing persecution of their own in their native land. Some wanted religious freedom, some wanted opportunity. And so there were a multitude of different reasons why people went to other areas to try to find greener pastures, essentially. It wasn't just because they wanted to go conquer, kill, and destroy and maim and terrorize and maraud. That's not true. That's not true.
Oh, let's. If you want to, you can stop when you want to stop, though.
Got you. I got you.
It's them out as well. There's only one people that have attempted such a thing. No other peoples can you identify as that level of vicious colonials to where they go and actually replace the population. Now, the irony is that you now find significant populations of whites in North America, which we call today America and Canada. And then they complain as though it's not right for them to be replaced or reduced in population, even though it's not occurring by murder, which is how they got here. Somehow it's strange that like all of a sudden we need to respect who's on the land. But when it came to the Aboriginals or the Native Americans, you might say, or those that they wrongly called Indians, when they were about to be replaced by you through murder, it was all good. We didn't need any theories. We didn't need to protest. It just was what it was. From sea to shining sea, it was destiny. So this is an important thing for us to really think about, just the nature of their lies and not to get wrapped up in their lies and their deceit, because they've been fooling you and I for centuries. And you must wake up from this slumber. But let us carry on for a bit, and we'll move on to the next piece.
Not only that, those who promote the Great Replacement theory argue that welcoming immigration policies for non-whites.
I can't stand the way he talks, man. And again, all these other peoples, and I'm sure he's not a Christian. Even if he is, he's certainly a blasphemer, because you can't be rooted in biblical morality, biblical ethics, and biblical understanding, and say the kinds of stuff that he's saying. But saying that they just came and just killed the Native Americans. Ladies and gentlemen, this did not happen. Okay, this did not happen. These are lies. These are just. I'm sorry, bro. I can't even remember why I want to do to stop the video. Maybe it's because I was just laughing at the way this dude talk. He just irks me, man. He just irks me, man. He just irked me. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. These peoples would have done the exact same things that the Europeans did had they had the opportunity to do so. Because again, there was a unique confluence of circumstances that allowed for the flourishing of different, European peoples. If you look at, I mean, bruh, there are so many different groups, and there's so much land and space here on the planet Earth to talk about European expansion and to talk about the world from centuries ago, to go across centuries upon centuries. If you want to go back to the you can go all the way back to the 10th century. There was a Islamic historian by the name of Ibn what was his name? Ibn Hakel. His name is spelled Haw. I don't know, if you looked it up, you may find it. But he was one of the earliest world travelers, and he was a Muslim historian. And he talked about how the Asante tribe in Western Africa would import slaves from other parts of Africa simply so that they could be sacrificed in these rituals and ceremonies. And these Europeans, bro, and from whether it was their contact.
Hold on, Chuck. Was he with the Ottoman Empire?
I'm just put him up real fast because he died.
Ibn Hakel of Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, yep, Ibn Hakel. That was probably him. That's the guy I'm talking about. Yep, it's Ibn Ibn
He's a Muslim writer, geographer.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and he talked about a lot of the things that, because even the Muslims were appalled by a lot of things that they saw the natives in Africa doing, and child sacrifice, of course, was one of them. Again, I'm not saying, of course, Muslims have their own problems, have their own issues, for sure. But Europe was unique, and see, when it's funny how that's the point I was going to make. When you look at you can go all the way from the 7th century, you go all the way up through to the colonialism that still existed in the 20th century by the 1940s, 1950s. You're going over all of this time. You're talking about so many different people and so many different groups interfacing with one another, and so many different types of empires and governments with certain different governing philosophies, different laws and customs and expectations for behavior for the people that were under their sway. To talk about all of this richness, all of this historical richness, to talk about it in such mundane terms, to say that, well, it was just about oppression and slave, to speak about it in this way, once again, just goes to show you that you're not dealing with a serious person. This is a man-child sitting up here with his strange-looking shirt, spouting off things that he doesn't even understand. When you look at, for example, the British Empire, which I happen to know more about the British Empire than any other empire because of, the circumstances of my birth. And so it went from, at a time, even the Chinese in the ancient world thought the Europeans were backward and barbarous, considered them to be barbarians. The Arabs in the Middle East, for a time, thought the Europeans were barbaric. Even the Romans said of the peoples that would eventually become the Anglo-Saxons after a multitude of conflicts, from Wessex Wessex and then became England, and then the Anglo-Saxons were blended and taken over by the Normans, and the Normans became this, and then there wasn't any real semblance of sufficient homogeneous British culture until the rise of someone like William the Conqueror. Because see, what empire does and what imperialism and colonialism does, which this person doesn't seem to get, is like, yes, there are problems, yes, there are issues, but there are benefits to empire building. One of those benefits is the fact that it often offers one security and predictability and stability, right? You need stability, predictability, and respect for the rule of law in order for peoples to prosper, right? And sometimes it takes not mere moralizing and contemplation. It takes force to build empires. It takes force to build a state, because states and governments are an act of will. They have to be created. They don't just happen. Civilization doesn't just happen. So to say that Europeans didn't go through anything, I mean, they met with the Chinese, they gunpowder, the compass, and maps, and seafaring, and they had, in order to have an industrial revolution, you need iron ore deposits, which they didn't have in Africa. Europe was the only place where the Industrial Revolution could have even occurred. So, you look at the Eastern Hemisphere versus the Western Hemisphere, the fact that the Western Hemisphere, its land mass is spread out east to west, as opposed to the Western Hemisphere, the bulk of its land mass is spread out north to south. So what that means is it makes travel extremely difficult, because when you travel along lines of latitude, guess what, Blanche? You're switching climates.
Right.
And so peoples, and this is why you can make the argument that the Eastern Hemisphere is quote unquote the ancient world, and many of our writings, our custom, our culture, our understanding comes from that part of the globe, is because of the Western Hemisphere and its limitations that were placed upon it based upon its geography. And so Europe was unique because Europe had contact with Asia, right? Central Asia, Far Eastern Asia. It had contact with the Roman Empire, right? With the Greeks and and so on and so forth. And so things happen in Europe that by no fault of their own. I mean, yes, they had to go through these trials and tribulations, but because of the unique confluence of their circumstances, they were able to expand their empires across seas, which is something that the Incas and the Aztecs and other African empires were unable to do, because hinterland travel is far too costly. It's costlier it costs more to your person, to your body, and to your resources, et cetera, to traverse the land. Hinterland travel inward. It's hard to travel inward. Europeans were able to expand their empire because they were able to use the seas. Because again, bro, they had things that other peoples didn't have access to.
So it sounds like, Chuck, that because the Europeans got there first, they're getting penalized for it. So we can all agree that based on what they were doing in their own countries, these countries would have did the same thing.
Absolutely.
But possibly we could argue that it would have been more brutal, because if you think about, just imagine an empire that's expanding and they believe in child sacrifice.
Exactly.
Or they believe in snatching up young virgins, whatever it is. Just imagine that empire that had those values actually expanding, going global, and to think about what the world would be like today if that was the standard of, well, if you born a girl, then I don't want you. If you, so I just thought that they're getting penalized because they were successful.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And a lot of these Europe, they were motivated also by Christian conviction. They were motivated by their Christian conviction, because they had in their minds, and this was one of the sort of moral quandaries that they found themselves in. Many a different. I mean, you were talking about the great European thinkers of the time, whether they were just kind of like secular philosophers of the Enlightenment, or whether they were, religious thinkers, such men as Thomas Clarkson and William Wilberforce and John Wesley. And I'm gonna get to some of the things that a lot of these men had to say. about, the African peoples and so on and so forth, they had in their minds, they said, well, we ought to have restraint. We ought not abuse and mistreat, these lesser people, so to speak. But with that understanding, they thought, as an extension of that rationale, if we are not to abuse them because we are superior in our state of superiority, do we have a moral obligation to prevent them from hurting each other? And see, again, you can have an opinion on it, right? But that is a legitimate moral question one has to ask themselves, particularly if they were convicted by Christ and their belief and they're seeing these things occur, and they're saying that I have an obligation to spread the good news, and I have to do I have an obligation to interject myself, to intercede, so that these people can learn how to live correctly? Or should we just leave them to their own devices? It's not, it's not an easy thing to, it's a worthwhile question. It's not a stupid question. It's a legitimate moral quandary. And a lot of Europeans took the route of let's interject, but not even Blanche, let's just go in there guns blazing, everybody, get down and lay down. No, a lot of these people were believed in gradualism, gradual change. Let's win the natives over by moralizing with them. Let's teach them. Let's talk to them. And since he's on the topic of replacement theory, one of the things that a lot of the European empires would do, particularly the British Empire, is they would mitigate, they would make sure to not send too many British to parts of Africa, parts of India, because they didn't want to change the demographics up too quickly, right? And then oftentimes what you would have is you would have a native population, say, for example, a place like India, this is my last point, like a place like India, they would start to familiarize themselves with the European way of life, and then they found themselves enjoying it and liking it. And then once things were becoming stable, that's when you had, the rabble rousers and the big mouths talking about, and so that would lead to this sort of disconnect where essentially the kind of, race relations essentially between the colored man of India and the white man of Europe had to be, they had to sort of reconcile or mend their relationship after they had worked for decades trying to sort of build a closer bond with one another. So Indians, for example, but if you shook an Indian man's hand, if you were a white man, and the Europeans were trying to build camaraderie with them, but they were so stuck in their ways. So, for example, if a white man shook an Indian's man's hand, he would go wash his hands and change his clothes. They talked about how it was difficult for Europeans and Indians to come together and break bread with one another, because if a white man's shadow was to cast over the food, the Indian man would throw the food out. Because your shadow cannot cast a shadow over the food. So they would throw the food out. And so there's all sorts of examples of this kind of thing. The white men, just like they have the Brahmins at the top, you have the untouchables at the bottom in the English caste system. The whites in India oftentimes were treated like untouchables. Just imagine if you shake somebody's hand or somebody touches you, you're so disgusted by them just brushing against you or touching you, you immediately have to change clothes.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, Chuck. And the point is that the assumption is that when, speaking in layman's terms, when the white man touched on the soil, that the natives didn't want to be a part of his culture.
Right. Yeah.
Like the assumption is that when he touched down, they were like, why are you here? Get away from us. We just, and I just feel like that didn't happen.
It didn't. They were fascinated by and many of them wanted to be a part of it. They wanted the Europeans there. And I'm gonna give you some examples and prove it to you in a second. Right. But go ahead.
Are part of a plot.
Now, here's the irony, and you should find this to be extraordinarily comical. They're out to get us. So you have basically If all dogs were a breed, the Europeans would surely be the pit bull, which is to say, people do have them as pets, but they're liable to snap on you and kill you. And that goes for the owner and as well as the children of the owner. Extraordinarily vicious are these people. The evidence is extraordinary. There's none that compare to them. And despite them being extraordinarily vicious, evil, I'm talking about RAPE, I'm talking about genocide was their invention. All of that, despite that being them, those are their inventions, they say they're out to get us. Who could be out to get you? You're the only one that's out to get anyone. World War II, that's a European affair. World War II, that's a European affair. World War III, it's a European affair. Who could be out to get you? No one. It's not even sensible. Yes, you know, it's funny the way you're taught history. You're taught history in a very specific way that attempts to remove the evil reality of European conquest. You're taught history in a way that is extraordinarily dishonest. The history you learn in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, and I know because I was an elementary school teacher, they have told the history in a way that suggests that North and South America were sparsely populated. And when the white Europeans came here, and it suggests that they came here on purpose, when in actual fact, there were certain winds that were emerging that pushed them here on accident, which is why that the natives here were called Indians as opposed to what they really were. That's because someone was trying to get to perhaps India.
Mind you, Blanche.
Get to India.
Mind you, again, this is a man child. This is someone who has he's a child. He has the maturity of a child. He talked about World War I and World War II and how these are European wars. These are the white man wars. Never mind the fact that, of course, the Ottomans were involved in the First World War. There were all sorts of peoples involved in the First World War, the Second World War. Of course, we all know that Adolf Hitler had all black regiments. He had all Arab regiments in his Nazi war machine, et cetera, et cetera. But I guess, you just gotta either join them or, get rolled over or whatever. But the reason why I say he has the mentality of a child is because he, like so many other weak, just jellyback, this left wing, I don't know. They don't understand that war can actually be used for good. That in the fact that we here today say such things as, well, killing is bad and war is bad and war should be kept to a minimum, and it's bad when people get hurt. It's bad. The reason why we have the luxury of saying that is because other peoples have made the sacrifice for us to be able to say such things, because they laid the foundation for the type of moral clarity that we can have today. This is the reason why for example, the old Western, Blanche, the archetype of the old Western gunfighter. This is why Westerns were so popular in Hollywood and in America amongst audiences, I guess prior to 1950s and earlier, is because the archetype, the thesis of the Western is that here you have a guy, and say like Shane or just pick a movie. Here's a guy who he was the quintessential man prior to, and now we are kind of trekking into modernity, and he's a man who society will soon forget, but he is also a man that made it possible for what we have today. And here's this very same man trying to figure out, what does he do with himself, and where does he go in the world that no longer needs him? Where does he go in the world that has forgotten him? And then all of a sudden, there's always that, when you have the old bandit, the old gang comes into town and they're ruining the town, and here comes the old gunslinger, because we oftentimes need to be reminded that, right, we cannot sort of outlaw, right, this kind of masculinity, because if we do, then only outlaws actually become men. In worst case scenario, they are the ones who tend to terrorize those of us in the society who want to abide by the rules and expectations. but you do need a strong man to come to step in and put the bad man in his place, because oftentimes we forget that our world is still comprised of bad men who do very bad things. So to sit up here and say that, well, you know, there were wars, yeah, there have always been wars, and there will continue to be wars. So again, like what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about?
So his argument, which I don't agree with, is that war, genocide, RAPE, these things were invented. These things were invented by white people. Like, what? So this is what I mean, Chuck. There's this notion that the world was a utopia and everybody was living great. And the white man decided to just crash the party and disrupt everything. And I'm just curious as to where did that come from, that the world was a utopia? Because I just can't imagine that it was. Even when people wanted to go settle out west, it was hard. Like, it was hard to even go settle without wars. It was hard to go and settle a land where nobody was even around. So I'm just trying to figure out this notion that the world was this great place, and then the white man showed up out of nowhere and just took it over and invented genocide.
That's what he said, isn't it?
And war and RAPE, that's his invention. And then another thing about I'm gonna let you speak.
Go ahead.
The dog analogy. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, if your dog has teeth, it's gonna bite. So I don't. Y'all be trying to separate these breeds. If he got teeth, he gonna bite. So him trying to say he's a pit bull, German Shepherd, pit bull, Chihuahua, they all will be liable to bite somebody. So the breed don't make a difference.
Right.
Let me go. And one more thing, Chuck. I just think that this great replacement theory is kind of taken out of context a little bit, because I don't believe it's more or less like white genocide versus the erasing of culture, where you take you're destroying you're destroying Western culture. He said there's no evidence to this, but in Europe there is evidence, because we see, I think in Ireland there was just one town where now it's like 20% of the babies that were born or have Muslim names. So certain towns are being taken over by Muslims. And again, I'm gonna play a video too, Chuck. But like I said before, when I go to Ireland, I want to go to Ireland. I don't want to go to Ireland that's the Middle East. I'm sorry, I don't. If I go to the Middle East, I'm going to the Middle East. If I'm going to Ireland, I'm going to go to Ireland. So there is a such thing as this Western culture being under attack. And you can agree that you and I have benefited from Western culture, as well as Marquette. He has benefited from Western culture to be where he is today. Think about if he was born in Somalia, or if he was born in Ghana, or if he was born in Kenya, or if he was born in Republic of the Congo. Would he really be Marquette today? Would he really be the same person?
Absolutely not.
Pulling up on Andrew Tate? Come on.
Not unless he left. I found a way to escape.
You said the right word, escape.
Yeah.
So you thought these were Indians? Come on. And when the Europeans ended up here on accident, then they misnamed these people, and they also found that they could do their usual 1-2, which is RAPE, murder, steal the gold, steal the silver, and steal the land. That's what they do. And they murdered millions upon millions. We're talking about hundreds of millions dead. And for some curious reason, in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, we just call it Thanksgiving and wear nice hats.
Man, has this man ever heard the name? I mean, does he know who Hernan Cortez is? Did he? I mean, seriously, hundreds of millions. That's what they did. They just came and just killed. How, Sway? How is that even possible? How does that even make sense in his peanut? How does that even make sense, Blanche? Come on, man. Come on, man.
Hold on, Chuck. I looked it up. They said it was about 50-something million in all of America, in all the Americas. This man said they came over here and wiped out hundreds of millions. So again, Chuck, there's this image that people were just this country was populated. They were just having a great time and just living life. And then one day the boats pulled up and the white man came and ruined the party.
Not at all. Not at all. And like I said, you know, the peoples were more than willing. This is partly part of the reason why Hernan Cortez, massively outnumbered, severely outnumbered, was able to topple the Amexem Empire, the Aztec Empire, because he had assistance from other natives who were sick and tired of living under the tyranny of the Aztecs. They were tired of having their towns raided, their children taken, their women taken. They were sick and tired of being sacrificed to their gods and enslaved and so on and so forth. When Christopher Columbus, when he came, you know, and Columbus and many of the others that came with him, they asked the native, what happened to you? You know, because a lot of them were scarred up, they were maimed, and you know, said, and they explained to him, you know, here's what continues to occur. And when they take Columbus's words out of context, when he talks about how the natives here would make for good slaves, he was simply making a kind of declarative observation because they were so, you know, meek and docile and passive and kind. And he was saying to himself in his writings that I see why essentially someone would try to enslave them, because they are these, you know, nice and docile and inviting people. But again, they were sick and tired of being tormented by the larger, more aggressive, tribes or the most, more aggressive tribe or group. In this case, we're talking about the Aztecs.
So hold on,
And
Chuck,
it's a whole history with it.
Is it safe to say, Chuck, that if there was an empire, a large empire like, let's say, the Mayans and the Incans, or that the fact that the empire existed meant that people were subjugated?
Yeah.
So if anybody did come to the land, whether it had to be Europeans, I think if anybody would have came, they probably would have been like, we'll work with you because we're tired of this.
We're tired of them.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're tired of them.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And bro, it's all type of examples that even from Columbus to Cortez, these men, I don't know, bro. It's like, again, bro, it's so much. If you just want to sit back, if you want to talk about Spain and Hernan Cortez, if you want to talk about Christopher Columbus, I mean, it's so much history, it's so much to talk about, so much to unpack, and it's so nuanced and textured that, I mean, we can't even do justice to this conversation because we simply don't have the time.
Right.
And again, and the fact that this man is making these broad, sweeping, caricatured, analysis or interpretation of the past simply so he can sort of dwell and wallow in his own persecution complex, it's disgusting, man. It's disgusting. Stick to the red pill stuff, bro. This ain't where you belong.
And Chuck, I thought it was odd because one thing Kevin Samuels didn't do was preach this victim mentality. I can't do the white man. Like, he never talked like that. And it's just funny that most of these new red pill guys, it's like they took Kevin Samuels' stick, if for lack of better words, but then they're still victims though. So it's like you mix red pill content, but you still talking about the white man is doing this, but you kind of red pill, you kind of conservative, you kind of like it's crazy. Like, Kevin Samuels never talked about being a victim. Matter of fact, any kind of victim talk would get you cussed out by him.
Cut out, yeah.
Like, no
like
of feathers and commemorate the natives as though we're not standing upon their bones as we speak. That's what the Europeans do. They erase your history and then they lie about who you were and then they lie about who they are. They're murderers.
Oh,
that's
he
what they are. They're murderers.
Mind you, Blanche, she's not going to give up anything that he owns. He won't give up anything that he has. Right. I don't see him moving out of his home and going out and maybe purchasing a parcel of land and constructing his little teepee and lying outside, maybe, you know, building a garden next to his little teepee. No, he's totally fine with all of the wonders of Western development. He loves it. He won't give up a single thing he owns.
Chuck, he said that one day he was somewhere and he was around some poor people and he looked at his Rolex and he said, why am I wearing this Rolex? So he don't wear his Rolex anymore because he stands in solidarity with the poor people that can't afford a Rolex. That's what he said. I'm not joking. So he gave up wearing. He didn't give the Rolex up. He just gave up wearing a Rolex.
Right. Yeah. But he knows so much. Again, bro, he doesn't even understand that it's not just the end product, right? I mean, you look at the value of you know, you look at the value of the end product, but you neglect to mention all of the hands and every sort of every dynamic and every moment along the chain, along the division of labor. The fact that there is you may have a demand for high priced goods or whatever the case may be. The fact that the demand for such an item exists is what feeds so many people. When I hear folks say, for example, like, oh man, why do you need to live in this big house? Why do you need this mansion, man? You know, you can live. I want to live in a mansion. I can afford one. If they build it, I'm gonna buy it.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
because we've all seen the I-Pencil documentary. If you look at a home just by itself and just look at, I mean, it is a living, well, it's not living, but it's like the epitome of so much economic dynamism just in that thing in and of itself. Somebody had to build it. Somebody had to supply the materials. Somebody had to do the plumbing, just on and on and on and on. The fact that you demand a certain car, you demand a certain home, you demand a certain watch and what have you, you are actually feeding people that you don't even know by simply participating in the market.
Right.
That's how it works. It's chess, how it works. You know, denouncing your role, just pretending like that's just some smug virtue signal that doesn't make you virtuous. Anyway,
this day, vicious, evil murderers.
Meant to either weaken or replace the political power and culture of white people living in Western countries. When I say Western countries, it's not just Europe I'm talking about. I'm also talking about the Americas, Australia, and New Zealand.
Now, I want to point out something to you. You see, white people only come from Europe. Only. But you have them widespread in North America, widespread in New Zealand, widespread in Australia. They invaded those places. Murder. Now, here's the thing. What you all often don't realize is when you're speaking in coded language, when we say Western countries, what do we mean? I'll tell you. We mean white countries. That's what we mean.
What?
We mean white countries. Western is a code.
Blanche, will somebody remind this dude that the earth is spherical? Western countries aren't, it doesn't denote or connote geography. Western countries connotes culture. We're talking Christendom. We're talking about the Renaissance. We're talking about the Enlightenment. We're talking about the legacy of Greco-Roman philosophy and the great works, the great classics from Homer and Aristophanes, right? The Bible and Shakespeare and Adam Smith. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about Western societies, Western culture, and Western values, you see. Because human beings, I saw you, Blanche, you be playing, that's another dude. Umar Johnson been getting on my nerves for years, so he like all the way up here. But that one dude, I don't know who he is, bro. I think he from New York somewhere, because he got one of them New York accents. The dude talking about he a killer cop and all this food. Smart. I think you played another clip from him, and he was like peddling in that just BS. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Dr. Neely Fuller BS about the fear of genetic annihilation, just complete and utter quackery, no science, no scholarship, no truth to it at all. But the white man fears genetic annihilation, and that's the is imprimatur. That's the meaning or the drive behind his need to push white supremacy, because he fears genetic annihilation. It's like, wait, he fears what? Oh, he fears genetic annihilation for the sake of somebody else who considers themselves to be white, or does he fear his own annihilation, just as we all as human beings kind of have this natural, some may call it fear, or some may call it a kind of apprehension, because we're all trying to stave off death as long as we can, right? Because certain concepts and certain things such as death has a whole heap of ramifications that many of people either find, again, terrifying, they find it perplexing, they find it deeply philosophical, deeply moving, deeply confusing, and so on and so forth. And so, yes, we as sentient human beings who are conscious as ourselves and of ourselves have a natural fear of annihilation. But what the hell is this fear of genetic annihilation as it pertains to an entire group of people? I myself don't want to die, right?
Who
Well, I
does
want to
though?
stay alive as long as I can, but who wants to die? Who does?
Who does want to? That doesn't make no sense. Like
So
genetic annihilation. Nobody wants.
right. So when I hear this guy, he's talking about, well, white people only come from Europe. Life, this person only comes from that, right? But there are certain, again, we can't account for geographical changes. We cannot account for climatological changes at times, right? Things occur. We had the great, famine in Ireland that brought a lot of Irish immigrants to the United States in the mid 1800s. We had the bubonic plague in Europe. We had, you have droughts. You have all sorts of things. People will try to move about the earth as best they can, if need be, when the circumstances surrounding them become so harsh that they either have to pick up and migrate or they're going to die. Peoples in the Americas did the exact same thing. So what it sounds to me like he's implying is that, yeah, he said it himself. I understand it is worthwhile to say, well, we want to keep Europe for white people. But what if Europe becomes unhospitable? Or what if parts of Africa becomes inhospitable?
Right.
Are they to remain there?
Right.
Or should they seek out somewhere else to stay amongst people who may or may not be welcoming to them? They should leave. They should go. And that's what people will do. Naturally, that's what people will do. So what are you saying? They just need to stay there? Nah, bruh.
Stay there and suffer.
Stay there and suffer. Stay there and die. No.
Listen, he thought he dropped a jewel too when he said Western means white. Like he thought he was dropping some science.
No.
Language for white. It's a racially coded language. It's a euphemism for white. Come on. Work with me here.
Come on, work with me here.
That's all that is. Don't act dumb now. Yeah, some of you are engaging in white supremacy and don't even know it. I try to be aware when I'm doing. Shout out to Falcon. He writes, these Spanish conquistadores strangled that last Inca king after he converted to Christianity. Absolute animals, indeed. And the irony of the Europeans and their claim to be civilized, they're the most murderous, vicious, perverted persons on earth. And ironically, what they do is they call you what they are. They behave like animals. They live filthy, and then they call you uncivilized, filthy animals. Isn't that ironic? And they're so good at.
Chuck, I got a question. So Andrew Tate's European, right?
Yeah, I guess he's a native of Romania. I think that's where he was born. That's where he lives now, I guess.
So why would you take chocolates to the white savage brutal man? I don't understand, because he's saying he's not distinguishing white people. He's just saying, oh, this is how they are. He's not saying some are good, he's saying all. My question is, why are you taking chocolates to the quote unquote European white man?
No, he's from, I guess to say he's British. I guess he's British, or maybe he may even have dual citizenship. I don't know, because I just pulled his name up real quick, and Wikipedia says he's American and British. So I don't know. Anyway, but go ahead. But you bringing chocolates to this savage, to this animal.
It just don't make no sense to me. I'm just
okay.
Healing and claiming other people's cultures as their own. It is really quite remarkable.
It's a
These
lie.
Europeans are so dishonest that they'll say that Egypt is in Europe, right? Egypt is clearly in Africa. They want to act like it's in Europe. Then you have the Arabs.
Chuck,
Who's doing that,
nobody
Blanche? Who's
has
doing
ever,
that, Blanche?
nobody has ever said that, man. Come on, man. Now come on, man. God, oh, come on, Chuck. Listen now. Nobody has ever said that Egypt was in Europe. They may have said it's the Middle East as a stretch, but they ain't never said it's in Europe. That's a lie.
Jeez, oh please.
Arabs want to act like Egypt is in the Arabian world. All silliness. All has been disproven. But these people are marketing masters. Shout out to Leon supporting the work now, so acknowledge free.
But it is a massive, not just geographical, but there's a massive cultural difference between Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. You know, Egypt is more culturally aligned to what we call Middle Eastern or Near Eastern culture. But anyway, go ahead, bro. It's not European. It may be a part of the African continent, but it's Near Eastern.
It's not really African.
Yeah, it ain't really African, right?
He writes, Elon calls his views trolling to convince fools that he's not a racist, right? But you can't fool me. Shout out to Mr. Jones. He writes, Peace the Saints had a question. Do you think that the grid go down? Let's go ahead and carry on. Let's go back to his work.
By the way,
what am I
He cut him off quick. He was like,
he didn't want to answer that.
What degrees go down? Let me get him out of here. Boy, he got him up out of there, boy.
He didn't want to answer. He didn't want to answer that.
That's his worst nightmare. Degrees go down. Oh, he finished. Listen.
Check out my video about Western values when you get a chance. Huh? Simply put, the Great Replacement is the alleged replacement of whites by non-whites. It often overlaps with a larger theory called the white genocide conspiracy theory, which...
Now, here's the great comedy about this. You really don't see many genocides occurring that have nothing to do with white people. Anytime you see a genocide, it's either waged by Europeans directly, or they've reorganized a people, usually as a result of colonialism and or violence, and they've put people at odds. Rwanda, Cambodia. So you almost never see a genocide that's not directly enacted by Europeans or a direct result of how Europeans reorganize society.
Time out. I'm sorry, Blanche. This man said Cambodia. I'm gonna give you a brief. Okay, so we all familiar with the Cambodian genocide, right? This was about mid to late 1970s. This was after the United States, thanks to the domestic left, had sabotaged our war effort in Southeast Asia. You did have a rivalry between Vietnamese communists and Cambodian communists. Part of the reason why the Vietnam War lasted as long as it did was because the United States, I forgot the background of the technicalities behind why this was in fact the case, but for some reason that I can't recall off the top of my head, the United States was barred from taking military action in neighboring Laos and Cambodia. What the Vietnam were doing was they were making it extremely difficult because they were and this of course led to it wasn't a massive military success, but the media kind of played it up like it was. I forgot when the Vietnamese, the communists from the north of Vietnam were able to come around and sack the south and come up from the rear. But anyway, I'll get, because it was a military disaster that left so much egg on the face of Lyndon B. Johnson that he decided not to run for re-election. But anyway, once Richard Nixon, along with with the advice of Harry Kissinger, decided to, without congressional approval, they decided to extend the military's bombing campaign into neighboring Cambodia. And so that led to a lot of issues. Anyway, the story of the Vietnam War, or the war in Southeast Asia, as I like to call it, is another very, very complex topic that warrants complete, just, we can't even fully understand it. But the Vietnamese communists were far more battle hardened and far more, because communism had been in Vietnam since the 1920s. The Soviet Union went into that part of Asia and began propagandizing a lot of Asians. The Russian who went into that part of Asia is a man by the name of Mikhail Borodin. And, you had the Vietnamese communists were all around Vietnam as far back as the 1920s. Well, when we left Vietnam in 1973, of course, that led to the rise of the Khmer Rouge. And then, Vietnamese, they went back into Vietnam, took over the whole of Vietnam. And then, Cambodia also became communist, albeit they were still, although a communist country, they were still at odds with neighboring Vietnam. Well, of course, the leader of the Khmer Rouge was a man by the name of Pol Pot. His born name was Saloth Sar. He was born Saloth Sar and gave himself the name Pol Pot. He was given he was awarded a kind of, I think it was, I don't know if it was some type of scholarship, but anyway, he attended an institution. I can't recall what the name of it was, but he went to go study. I think it was some type of like audio engineering is the best way I could describe it, in France, where he picked up Marxism and came back to Cambodia as a teacher. And then he began to spread a lot of these Marxist ideas that he had learned from the French. Well, the reason why this is so significant is because of the French colonial presence in his native Cambodia. He sought, in order to rebuild Cambodia and restore its former greatness, he had to sort of push back the clock, because prior to the French coming in, to go back to your question, Blanche, when the hell was the world this peaceful? When was the world such this great place? Well, in the mind of Pol Pot, Cambodia was at the heights of its glory during its ancient time prior to French colonialism coming into that part of the world. So he wanted to do as the French attempted to do in the late 1700s, was essentially restart the clock, to restart history from year one. So he wanted to eliminate everything that French development, everything that European development brought into Cambodia. He wanted to remove it. He wanted to eradicate it. This is why, of course, he moved everybody from Phnom Penh. Everybody knows the story of Cambodia. And he drove everyone in Cambodia from the cities out to the rural areas, on the farms, in the fields, hence the killing fields of Cambodia. Because he wanted to get rid of every remnant of French culture. He wanted to get rid of it.
Okay, so Marquette made it seem like the United States did a mass genocide, or whoever, on the Cambodians.
No.
But
No.
What you're saying is this guy, Pol Pot, he went to France, studied, came a Marxist. When he came back, he said, I want to reset everything.
I want to reset everything.
Okay, Chuck, now we can agree that if a person says, I want to reset dealing with humans, people going to die.
Yeah.
And especially when you say that he drove everybody out of the city into the farmland. So did they have a choice whether they had got the, I mean, what about their rights? What if I don't want to leave? What if I say I'm staying in the city?
Hey, you go or die. You know what I'm saying? Anybody who was, and thanks, Sean Meyer, the Tet offensive, that's what it was. Anybody who was educated, anybody who had any type of degree, anybody, I mean, it was the Khmer Rouge was so, which Khmer, of course, means, Rouge means red. If Khmer means, somebody help me in the chat, mean red something. Of course, that's the color of communism, red, the family, the brotherhood, right? I mean, they were so extreme. I mean, anybody who was, and China was similar, anybody who damn near could read, who spoke English, if you wore glasses, you were considered an intellectual, so they would kill you. Eurocentric names were out. Yeah, the Cambodian genocide was one of the worst genocides in human history, and it took place in the 1970s. If anybody wants to know what communism looks like, and it's one of its worst, and the fact that I mean, this is one of the worst genocides in human history, considering the fact by proportion or per capita, considering that Cambodia is a relatively small country. I mean, almost nearly between a third and half of its population was wiped out.
But the guy was Cambodian, all right.
He was Cambodian.
So why is Marquette blaming the white man for that?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, maybe because the French, because Cambodia was a French colony at a time. You know, and this was a popular saying amongst the Khmer Rouge, is they claimed that they were doing what they were doing for Angkor. You know, you had it's this big temple, this big religious temple in Cambodia called Angkor Wat. And he was sort of kind of doing what he was doing to the god of Angkor. So, you know, everything in order to restore any, you know, equality and the glory. Yeah, you know, and what was the name of the there was a guy who Pol Pot was dang, I'm not on my game tonight, y'all. I can't remember his name, but yeah, man, it was
somebody working with him.
Yeah, no, he was actually working against him, because he was trying to Prince Sihanouk. Prince Sihanouk, he was one of your kind of moderate. I mean, because Cambodia was, you know, was a relatively free place. He was sort of cozy with the United States government, and you know, once he started writing on the wall that pretty much that Cambodia was being abandoned, just like Vietnam, and you know, luckily the same thing didn't happen in Korea. It almost did. The exact same thing happened in China after World War II, and you know, when the United States, when we surrendered Manchuria and gave up that part of China, which allowed essentially Mao Zedong to overtake Shanghai's check. There was fear. He was afraid that he would be captured and eventually executed by his communist rivals. So he ended up fleeing the country, and then they tried to kind of come back and almost have like this dual kind of government. It's a whole story, man.
It's a lot of nuance to just wrap it up.
Yeah. Come on now.
So Chuck, it says that in 45 months, he killed possibly an estimated 2 million people in 45 months.
It's the white man.
And that wasn't the white man that did that. That was the Cambodian. But I guess, according to Marquette, the white man taught him genocide. I don't know.
It's just a genocide he's familiar with, so he just rattling off stuff. You know, he wants to blame us for Cambodia too. Wow. I mean, not Cambodia, Rwanda. He wants to blame us for Rwanda too.
Yeah, he said the white man put the people against each other.
But ironically, those people, Europeans, who have never been victim of a genocide committed by non-Europeans, are bluffing and creating lies as though they should be scared. It's just not even sensible.
I would like to ask Marquette if he's ever heard of the bubonic plague, aka the Black Death. Sort of similar to what happened to the Native Americans when the Europeans came here. A lot of Native Americans died because, you know, they were not immune to the pretty, you know, benign, fairly, get a little sick, cough, sniffles, boom, all of a sudden, a few days you're fine. You know, the Europeans, due to their prolonged contact with so many different people, particularly the peoples of Asia, they were able to build up their immune systems over a longer period of time, but they did so at great expense, because there's a reason why why history reminds us of what took place in Europe all those years ago, because it was one of the most traumatic mass casualty events in human history. The bubonic plague, it was called the Black Death. Well, something similar happened to the Native Americans, but it happened to the Europeans first. But guess who brought those flea-infested rats that were carrying the bubonic plague into Europe. It came across Asia. It came into Europe from Asia. But Europeans were never the victims of any such genocides or mass casualty events. I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
And he's going to say that the white man put the smallpox on the blankets.
They did not.
And gave it to Native Americans as a gift.
Nope. Myth, make believe, Hollywood fiction.
Let's continue. Let me just see if I can.
Which revolves around the beliefs that powerful people are trying to prevent whites from having kids. Often the conspiracy is blamed on, you guessed it, Jewish people.
And here's the comedy. When you look at, say, X or even YouTube, you have a bunch of people who are essentially imbeciles and they're trying to escape their own responsibility. And rather than admit that you have too much LGBTQ in your media, your government, and your schools, and LGBTQ, of course, homosexuality, in other words, is going to reduce birth rates, you fools. And you also feed your citizens garbage and portray it as food. You call it McDonald's, but it's really garbage. And then you see that the women are less fertile, the males are less masculine, and there's spikes in homosexuality that you promote on Netflix. And then you blame the Jews. Amazing. The Jews have done everything. But here's the funny thing. They blame the Jews and then say that the Jews are not white. Well, in actual fact, the Jews are clearly white, and they also clearly come from Europe. So you guys are clearly lying. That's the level of lies. They tell you not to believe your own eyes. You can look at the Jews and see that they're white, but they tell you not to believe your own eyes. You're looking at them like these guys are white, and they're saying that they're not white. They're telling you not to believe what you can see. This is sick, ladies and saints. It's truly sick.
This theory is manipulative because it equates normal patterns with murder. It's trying to put a big equals sign between the new Salvadoran or Syrian who lives down the street and a mental image of a concentration camp. Now, obviously, if they literally did that, then you and I wouldn't fall for the messaging. Therefore, the messengers have to be a little bit more subtle about it.
And who are the messengers? They're podcasters. They're Elon Musk. That's who they are.
And lately, they've gotten pretty good at manipulating us. Here's the thing, though. Not only are those who preach about the Great Replacement theory manipulating us, but as it turns out, the entire theory is bullcrap. It's literally not backed by evidence at all. There is no secret plot to get rid of white folks, but let's just say that there was. Well, they must be doing a pretty poor job, since there are more white folks now than ever before.
So this is where they didn't really they skipped over nuance. Well, first of all, I looked at the birth rates. White people are still having, I don't know where people got this from, Chuck, but white people are still having children more than anybody. I looked it up, more than anybody else. They're still having more children. He mentioned LGBTQ, but that's like 1 to 2% of the population. That's not affecting the birth rate of white people. Maybe you could say the foods could possibly cause health problems, but again, they're making this about an actual genocide versus an eroding of a culture. So
that's right.
They're taking this like a literal. Listen, I don't know who these guys are who are saying this stuff, but it's not about genocide. It's about Western culture, who we all, even the guy doing the podcast, we all benefit from Western. Okay, put it this way, Chuck. If they had to choose, where would they choose to live? America or Bangladesh?
Right.
And Bangladesh is one of the more civilized places we can pick. I'm just picking Bangladesh, but it's some worse places you can live. But so this notion that they're making it seem like this, what quote unquote white folks have created, is just 100% bad. But y'all, you're literally on platforms making a living off of what you learned from Western society. And I said, I asked Chuck earlier, if anybody wasn't here, would Marquette be Marquette if he was born somewhere else outside the United States? If he was born in Mexico City, would he be Marquette?
Right. And you know, this again, you hit the nail on the head, Blanche. There's clearly a war being waged against Western culture, right? In order to demoralize us, in order to, I mean, because you know, in order to have all of these lofty ideals, in order to try and maintain them and have a system in a society where you know these certain precepts are like the guiding forces for our you know the guiding light, so to speak, when it comes to our conduct and our actions and our beliefs. You have to have almost like a guardianship, a kind of custodianship of folk. They don't necessarily have to be white. Does it help that they're white? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And there's a reason why the majority of them are white. Yes, it does, because in order to have the kind of society that we often take for granted here in the United States, you have to have a certain understanding of the process that it took to get here. And human capital, it develops within a very specific context. It develops in a very specific demographic context. It develops in a very specific, you know, geographical context. Because if you know if you're seeing certain things around you, I'll give you a simple example, very simple example. Like I would ask anyone to look up. Let's see. I talked about the climate earlier in Lines of Latitude. How many, I don't know, NHL players or great NHL players or hockey players that are in their Hall of Fame, how many of them were born and raised in countries that are, you know, close to the equator? Or how many of it, you know what I'm saying? If you didn't live if you weren't born and raised in a cold climate, uh, you know, a country with a cold climate, then odds are, you know what I'm saying, you're not going to strive to become a great hockey player. It's because it's just not something you think, it's just not something that you think to do, right? Right. There aren't going to be, you know, many great legendary, I don't know, surfers, you know, hailing from places such as Nova Scotia, right? It's just not going to work that way. And so when it comes to the West and our values, you know, a lot of these colonialism, imperialism is what helped to broaden, and I sound like a broken record, and spread these ideas that this person commonly takes for granted, because the things that he claims that, you know, Western society is hell-bent on doing away with are, in fact, it's such a libel, it's such a slander, because these are the ideas that they actually brought into these areas that had never considered these things before, especially when it comes to slavery, right? I give you an example. Aristotle wrote one of the first, if not the first, kind of I don't necessarily want to call it a treatise because it wasn't like a, but Aristotle gave a written defense of slavery. And it was weird because I heard it explained by one author that Aristotle defending slavery was a step towards, it was a moral step in the right direction, him defending it. And you know, initial inclination would probably be to say, well, how so? Because the fact that Aristotle was willing to talk about it brought the issue of slavery into the conversation, because nobody had ever considered that it could even possibly be wrong in the first place to have to issue a defense in the second place, right? And then as time goes on, we begin to see, right, you know, the changes in the development. So they want to make us ashamed of ourselves, to make us ashamed of what we inherited. Again, Blanchard, you know this just as well as anybody else, so that they can then turn us into something else. So they can synthetically make us something else, turn us into something else. So yeah, like you mentioned, bro, the war is on the culture. The war is on Western culture. And is it some kind of racial thing in there, you know, indirectly, because, well, whites were the ones who brought these ideas to the, yeah, okay. it is what it is, but that doesn't mean it necessarily has to be that way, right? For perpetuity, like you mentioned, it's all about the culture, man. It's all about the culture.
Might be thinking,
Now, this is an important piece. They talk about genocide, but there's never any murder. The only time you can observe murder, or shall we say death, maybe call it war, the only time you observe whites being murdered is
Genocide
usually
is
when they're
not war.
murdering each other. World War I, World War II, World War III, which is currently underway. That's when you observe it. And even Noam Chomsky points out that the Europeans have had wars among themselves for.
So the Muslims weren't. So hold on. Weren't the Muslims conquering and killing white people?
Yeah, they were conquering and killing white people. You know, you talk about the Barbary Coast pirates, and they were, especially the Africans, with the sub-Saharan slave trade. And part of the reason why, matter of fact, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I'm going to read to you because I have a whole bunch. Because as I go through my studies throughout the years, I have a collection of important quotes that I've come across over the years. There's a man. He was a British imperialist. He was sent into Egypt to be their financial comptroller in like the late 1800s, because Egypt was on the verge of bankruptcy at that time, and Great Britain had to come in and essentially save Egypt. Good night, man. Hold on, bro. All right, good night, son. Come here. My son wants to say good night, Joe. Love you, boy. I'm gonna be here in a minute, man. Okay. All right. So anyway, so there's a man. His name was Evelyn Baring. Or Evelyn Baring. Evelyn Baring. Sometimes he's referred to as Lord Cromer. He was the first Earl of Cromer. Evelyn Baring. Here's a statement by Evelyn Baring. He was talking about, and this is just the kind of general sentiments and general attitude of just not just in India but just all over the British Empire. He says, no assurance can be felt that the electors of Rajputana, if they had their way, would not re-establish sati. What he's saying is, he's talking about if we give control over the governing of India over to the natives, they may reestablish the practice of sati. Sati was being practiced in India. Sati is when a widow, a wife, or a former wife, throws herself on the spire, because it was custom at the time, and it still may be customary as far as I know in India. When a person dies, the body is burned. Well, the wife voluntarily throws herself on the fire to be burned alive during her husband's essentially her husband's burial. This is done for the purpose. So this is their understanding. This is their perspective, that a widowed woman becomes a burden on society. She becomes a burden on her family because as a woman, she has to be taken care of. She needs to be protected, so on and so forth. And so the honorable thing for a widow to do is to die along with her husband, and she mustn't be carried onto the fire. She must voluntarily throw herself on the spire to be burned alive with her husband. Let me start the quote over. Evelyn Baring, y'all. One of the heroes of the British Empire that you probably never heard his name. No assurance can be felt that the electors of Rajputana, if they had their own way, would not reestablish sati. Christianity is our most powerful ally. We are the sworn enemies of the slave dealer and the slave owner. When the British Empire, and it was in 18, I might be off a year or two, in 1804, the British Empire put a stop to the slave trade. By, I think it was 1834, they issued a law stating that there is to be no slavery throughout the empire. They took up a poll from all eligible male voters by that time, And this is prior to the passage of that law that outlawed slavery throughout the empire in 1934. Over 70% of the voting males throughout the core of the British Empire was in favor of the abolition of slavery throughout the empire.
What was that percentage?
Oh, it was over 70. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was over 70, right?
Okay.
So the British Empire took the extra step to use use taxpayer resources, to allocate taxpayer resources to the functioning of their Royal Navy so that they could police the high seas to prevent people from trading in slaves, particularly Muslim majority countries from trafficking in slaves. One instance was so crazy that the African people of Lagos, they were in fact colonized by the British in response to their unwillingness to stop the slave trade. So you had white people, these colonizers and evil men that were saying, if y'all don't stop selling these slaves, y'all don't stop treating these people like this, we gonna come in and we gonna take your society over and we gonna make you stop. So again, it's amazing that the complete, I mean, they tell a complete opposite story of what actually happened. This is a quote from a woman. She was a Muslim woman living in Egypt. This is her remarking about the English presence in Egypt at the time, specifically as it pertained to the efforts of Evelyn Baring, the first Earl of Cromer. She says,
"Is in the 1800s?"
Yep. She says, he must be blind to see not what the English have wrought in Egypt. The gates of justice stand open to the poor. The streams flowing through the land are not stopped by the order of the strong. The poor are lifted up and the rich man is pulled down. The hand of the oppressor and the briber is struck when outstretched. This is what British the people of the British Empire brought to Egypt. The rule of law, order, respect, duty. Stop the exploitation, slavery. Stop doing what you guys are doing. And once again, they were informed by their classical liberal values that was popularized by the Enlightenment, and they were driven by their Christian conviction.
So Chuck, I want to continue this maybe next.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I know it's getting, and we were halfway through his video. Yeah, this has been good. I want to continue with to talk about the saint. Hold on, Chuck. I want you to, before you go, I just want to get one thing. That's all. Just one more thing. Hold on.
And he did just make a reference to Noam Chomsky, man. This dude. I don't know if you know who Noam Chomsky is, Blanche, but boy, oh boy, he one of the worst.
The whole family was gathered at my grand.
Well, so he's saying Noam Chomsky in a good way.
Yeah, he said something. Yeah, like Noam Chomsky said. He said it. Maybe if you go back like 20 seconds, I forgot what he said, but he made reference to Noam Chomsky in a way other than mockery and ridicule. So it wasn't good. Whatever he said about Chomsky, it wasn't good.
Okay, let me just. I just saw this video because he had the civil rights image in the background. I just want to play it before you go, but we're gonna do this next week, y'all, at the same time if you can, Chuck.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah,
let's do it, man. Let's do it, bro. I was trying to stop him interrupting him so much, but he was saying so much crazy stuff. But I just, Blanche, I kept a list of all of the great things that some of the benefits of colonialism. Again, they expand. I just wrote them down here just so I can rattle them off to you. Colonialism, imperialism, it expanded education, improved public health, they abolished slavery, widened employment opportunities, improved administration, the creation of basic infrastructure, led the way in the way of female rights, for women's rights, for whatever it's worth, enfranchisement of the untouchables or the historically excluded communities, fair taxation, access to capital, the generation of historical and cultural knowledge, and national identity formation. I mean, bro,
So it wasn't all bad. In other words,
I
like
wouldn't. At the end of the day,
yeah,
in a nutshell,
and
that's
in
what we say.
a lot of cases it was necessary.
It was necessary, bro. Because, like I said, societies have to be forged. They have to be created. And if you don't create them, you don't create order. Somebody else will. You know what I'm saying? And you better hope that the person with the biggest stick is the one who uses his force for good. On net, uses his force and his influence for good, and not evil, man. And that's what the white man, and that's what he did. You know what I mean? The first Society for the Abolition of Slavery was created in 1787 by a man named Thomas Clarkson. I'll probably talk about him next week. You know what I'm saying? If you read if we can go out, if you pull up what is it, the book of Genesis, I think it's chapter 4 verse 10. I think it was either Thomas Clarkson or John Wesley. He's the founder of the Methodist Church. You know, he used that verse to say, hey, you know what I mean? Because he talked about the Eucharist and the body of Christ. Again, these are men of Protestant extraction, and at the root of Protestantism is this notion of the priesthood of all believers, which of course, transcends all superficial political and racial identities and so on and so forth. And so John Wesley was of the opinion that the slave too is his brother. The African is his brother. So when in the book of Genesis in chapter 4, when Cain slayed Abel, and I forgot exactly word for word what that verse says, but he says that how can you, as a Christian, God died, for us all. How can you do this to your brother? Isn't the black man your brother?
Oh, they don't want to hear that now. They don't.
But nah, man. But all the white folks, all the white men was just killing, and they just uniquely violent. But no. Anyway, man, let's see what you got here.
Listen, Chuck. I haven't watched this video. I just saw the hat.
Oh,
so
okay.
I don't know what he's going to say. I just saw the hat in the background. I said, let me just grab it. So I was doing something. I don't know what he's going to say. I know it's going to be foolish, though.
The whole family was gathered at my grandmother's house. Door opens and Uncle Bill is in a wheelchair. I remember looking at him confused because he's covered in all of these bandages because his skull had been crushed. And I walked up to his wheelchair. I could tell that he was in a fragile state, and I was going to touch his arm. Even as a 7-year-old child, I felt like I might hurt him. And then I was like, hey, Uncle Bill, you okay? He couldn't even say anything back because his jaw was wired shut. I just remember looking at him, and all the beauty had been robbed from his face. Eventually, my grandmother told all of the kids, the police did this to Uncle Bill. I didn't quite understand why they would do that to Uncle Bill, because I only knew Uncle Bill to be my uncle, a great guy, which he was. He was never the same after that.
Man, shouldn't have been out there messing with them white folks, man. Leave them folks alone.
Listen, Uncle Bill was
cutting up.
He was out there cutting up, dog. Look, come on.
You already know.
Come on, man.
Yeah. I'll put it up, man. Genesis chapter 4. God then said, what have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground.
Yes.
Right. What hast thou done?
So what I'm seeing, and since there's slavery in these modern times today in non-white countries, there are 12 million slaves globally that nobody even talks about. None of the white countries are doing it. Yeah, Chuck, it seems like to me, though, we got this war with history where everybody's, to me, fighting to make white folks not look good at all. Like it's like they got to tell the story where the white people did nothing but pillage and plunder, and if anything good happened, it was because the natives or the indigenous or the aboriginals created something out of that, out of that terror and genocide and colonization, but
Right. It's the latest phase of the Marxian analysis of history of modern times. You know, it's just to invalidate the current structure, because when it's all said and done, Marxists, they hate anything that stabilizes. I think that's a quote of James Lindsay, that Marxists hate anything that stabilizes. And the fact that you know, like I think you say something, I mean, white folks, you know, you're gonna have to act right, you're gonna have to, you know, it's order. You know what I'm saying? And in many respects, I feel like it's sad to say, you know, the white race, you know, I hate to say it so crudely, kind of talk like them, but the white race in many respects has lost its way. You know, I wish, I'll tell you right now that I wish, you know, it's yeah, white, they've lost their way, you know, and white society, white whatever, the white it's just too much self-loathing, too much feeling sorry for yourself, too much feeling like you owe somebody something.
right.
You know, you're letting this. I mean, I know we probably aren't speaking to this audience, but you know, if you got friends, family, you got, tell her it's two black dudes y'all watch on the internet who have given you all the okay. It is okay. All is forgiven. You don't have to prostrate yourself to me. I'm not your savior. You know what I mean? You got to live by, right? Come on, now. I'm not the standard, now. You know what you're supposed to do. You know what I'm saying? I can't give you salvation. So what you looking? Why are you trying so hard to make sure that I got that you got my forgiveness? My forgiveness don't mean nothing. I can't do nothing for you. You know, Blanche, why they try so hard? Why they got the pander?
You haven't wronged me. You
Yeah, you ain't wrong me. You don't owe me nothing. You don't owe the world nothing. So stop it. Stop it. Tell your liberal friends they can knock it off. Knock it off, man. Because you gonna ruin us all.
Chuck, do you think Marquette messes with these European these European
Man, what Umar call it? Bunny hopping. He know he be bunny hopping. Talking all that trash. You know he do.
All right, I'm gonna let you go, Chuck. Listen, y'all, next week, today, Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we're gonna be back at 8 o'clock again, hopefully with Chuck. And we're gonna go through this deep dive into history and just getting a better perspective of putting things into context. You know, just somebody just saying white people are like pit bulls and savage, and that's the end of the story. It's just, no, we can't. It's just, that's too simple. It's a lot of nuance in just a person's history, even our life, right, Chuck? From the time you know, so
exactly. And you know, Thomas Sowell has an interesting quote, and I know many of you heard it. When Thomas Sowell, I mean, he's like so many gems, but he's talking about equality, and he's talking about how it's such an impossible thing to achieve, because he says even a person is not equal to himself on another day. Right. You know, I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm not the same person I was today and whatnot. And so we can look at our own lives, or we can look at our own understanding of the nature of God, our own understanding of science, our own understanding about just whatever, man. All of the moral developments and technological developments, scientific developments we've made over the years. We are superior in many ways to our former selves. So why is it inherently wrong for us to look across cultural lines and say to ourselves, we are better than they are? But like many of all the evil, wicked white men, and I'm going to get to them next week, that we all are taught we're supposed to hate, it's a difference between realizing something is, because in order to want to help something, or in order to be in a position to help, you must see yourself as inferior, but not because you want to pander, but because you have a genuine love and concern for your fellow brother. Because it's one thing to recognize and realize that something is not quite as developed as you are, right? Because of culture. And it's another thing to say something is naturally inferior. Many of the great white colonialists, imperialists, many of the great white thinkers, from Montesquieu to Adam Smith to John Stuart Mill, they talked about the inferiority of the Negro, or the inferiority of the African, but they also said that the African by and large, has the ability to be just like us if we teach him, if we show him. Now, you can, now, as harsh as that sounds, it may sound condescending. Okay, fair enough. But it isn't racist, because they aren't saying, in many of great white thinkers, in many of the great white, people, the architects of Western civilization, never, ever once put forth the notion that non-white peoples are naturally inferior to white people. They
Right.
never put forth that idea. Never. Never. It's anti-liberal. They never put forth that idea. That's not the Enlightenment. It's certainly held as in Christianity. That's not what they put forward.
And yeah, I mean, and also, Chuck, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense because if they say they can be the same if we teach them, what they're essentially talking about is culture.
Culture.
They're not talking about, they're talking about if they change their culture. But again, we can agree that nobody wants to live like these people live. You all can say what you want to say, and we use words like savage and barbaric, but these people are brutal. Even today, they're brutal. I was in Africa, and there was a guy, homeless, intestines hanging out, and I'm going to give him some money.
Right.
They said, don't do that. I was like, what? I said, they said, don't give him nothing. They said,
Right.
whatever he did, he deserves it. Like, it's just no kind of,
Bruh.
just like, none of that. Over here, that would never fly. That would never
fly. That's right. And that's all because of Christian morality, Western morality. In 1894, Cecil Rhodes gave a speech to Parliament where Cecil Rhodes said, again, Rhodesia was named after him. Rhodesia, of course, became, I think, Zimbabwe. You all know the story of Cecil Rhodes, right? Cecil Rhodes said in a speech before Parliament in 1894, quote, "Now I say natives are children." He's talking about Native Africans or whatever. "Now I say natives are children. They are just emerging from barbarism. But they have human minds. We ought to do something with the minds and the brains that the Almighty has given them. I do not believe that they are different from ourselves." White people never believed that they were superior or better than you. They just needed to show you a better way, or perhaps you just didn't understand.
Right. Right.
And it wasn't always violent, bro. It was mutually beneficial for people. The whole world benefited. Look at what we are. Look at what we're doing.
And again, it's mass migration into white countries.
And they coming to where these folks stay. Messing it up for all of us, man. Dang.
All right, Chuck. So next Tuesday, 8 o'clock, we're gonna do part 2.
For sure.
And we're gonna keep dissecting this history with Chuck. Thank you, Chuck, for tuning in tonight, man. I really appreciate it. Like I
Thanks
said,
for having me, Blanche. I know you used to rocking out, man. Solo. I know you used to flying solo, bro. I appreciate you letting me come. Essentially, I did most of the talking. So thanks for bringing me on your platform, bro. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, when I heard Marquette, I was like, nah, you ain't saying. No,
Yeah,
we finna stop this listen at the door.
Yeah, you see at the door.
Yeah, you ain't coming in. Nah,
all right, man. I love you, man. You my man's for real, for real. Sub-Zero said, bro, he down in Atlanta, man. He said, what's up? Get out of here, man. He said, y'all can hook up.
Oh, yeah.
Grab a bite, you know what I'm saying? Break bread or something. He said, man, he want to meet you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna hit him up.
All right, man.
Hold on. You got his number?
Yeah, I'll text it to you.
Okay. I appreciate it. All right.
All right, bro. For sure, man. Catch you.
All right, y'all. We about to go. Thank y'all for tuning in tonight. Had Chuck on, gave us an excellent history lesson. And I liked it because, he was stopping Marquette. I actually like that where Marquette says something, then he stops it, says something, and stops it, so we don't miss anything. Just real quick, I'm going to super stickers real quick, and I can be out of here. CC777 wanted to say hi and stay well. Thank you, CC. Appreciate it. Combat Medic, thank you so much. Appreciate it. CC again, thank you. Really appreciate it. CC again. Oh, the lies. Thank you. Appreciate it. Broski Bear, Blanche, Chuck, thanks for the discussion tonight. Keep up the great work. God bless you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Rick Hapstead, thank you. Great show and great chat. He is Blanche and Teach Him Chuck. One love and God bless everyone. Thank you, Rick Hapstead. And Cruise Missile, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Listen, love y'all on YouTube and IG. We will be back, Chuck and I, next Tuesday. And really, it's a blessing for us to have access, you know, to Chuck like we do, because he's just really a wealth of knowledge, honestly. And like I said, if you all want to learn or teach somebody something about any of this stuff, you know, he has a whole channel y'all can go to, Teach Him Chuck, on YouTube. But anyway, y'all, I love y'all. I want to see y'all soon. Oh yeah, somebody mentioned it. I don't believe that Marquette's uncle came in. I don't believe that story, man. I don't believe no crushed. I don't believe it's all cap. I don't believe that crushed skull, his beauty was robbed from his cap. It's cap. It's cap. How do we know he even got beat up by the police? We don't even know that. We don't even know. Anyway, listen, love y'all, and we'll see y'all on Thursday. All right, love y'all.